Monsters. Let's talk about monsters. The core reason why people play Dragon Quest Monsters is because of that one word at the end of that title, monsters. And because there's so many monsters in these games, most people get exactly what they want. But what if I told you that in most of these games, there's actually a large amount of monsters in some of them that you can't even have access to? That's right, this video we're going to be talking about exclusive monsters. These are monsters that are locked behind something, usually some outdated social system of some kind, that prevents you from getting these monsters in a playthrough of these games, of any Dragon Quest Monsters game at all, except maybe the most modern one, or unless you're a Japanese time traveler. So unless you fall into one of those categories, let's take a look at the monsters you cannot encounter in any Dragon Quest Monsters game. So, welcome everybody, and this is Defeater of Souls, and if you are interested in any Dragon Quest Monsters exclusive content, feel free to subscribe to my channel, because that's what I talk about. Now let's get started. The first Dragon Quest Monsters game on the Game Boy didn't have anything of the sorts. Now, of course, this does make sense, as it was, after all, the original, and was just simply taking what people liked in Dragon Quest V and trying to work it into its own thing, so we don't have anything to talk about there. Dragon Quest Monsters 2, though, however, we actually do have 3 monsters in which you cannot acquire in a playthrough of the game. This was because they are actually given away as a giveaway in the 151st issue of the Nintendo Power magazine. For anyone who is born not in the last 70 years, the Nintendo Power magazine was a magazine released around the 2000s area where they'd often talk about Nintendo stuff, and amongst that was many Dragon Quest related content. The most recent Dragon Quest related content they ever released before Nintendo Power stopped production was a giveaway for 3 monsters. These are monsters that you may not recognize. There is the Dimensor, the Lamia, and the Elemental Kagebu. In order to get these monsters, you had to send a postcard to Nintendo Power's headquarters, and they'd basically let you know whether or not you won, and there'd only be 75 winners. Now, of course, we don't have a lot of info about these 3 monsters, and it doesn't really give us a lot, except maybe an idea of what their stats may be, and everything we're able to see in the one page we have access to. Now, of course, Dimensor reappears in Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince as a wormhole dragon, which is a fairly high-ranking monster. Lamia also appears under a different name, and they also are similarly a high-ranking monster. The only monster that we'd never see any mention of again is actually the Elemental Kagebu. However, it is implied that he is similar to both Fluffy and Scruffy, or Wadabu and Warubu, as the names of these tree spirits who are present heavily in the first original iterations of the Dragon Quest Monsters games. So since there's only 75 people who have access to this, and odds are they still don't have those copies, the only way to get any of these monsters, and of course any of the monsters I'm going to be talking about in my video, you're going to have to get these by hacking. So let's move on to the next game. Now, of course, I'm only going to be covering the English games, so let's move on to the next one actually released here in America, and that is going to be Dragon Quest Monsters Joker. Now, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker had one feature that was its main selling point at the time, and the sub-series of the Joker games in Dragon Quest Monsters are kind of trying to push this one feature, in which they eventually dropped by the time we got to Dark Prince, and this is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi battling was all the craze, and it was the main reason why people wanted to play Dragon Quest Monsters Joker. And of course, with there being so much Wi-Fi stuff, you know what else there was? Monsters locked behind Wi-Fi. That's right. By doing tag battling, you'd be able to get gifts, and those gifts would be one of 3 monsters that you could not obtain in any other way. These 3 monsters were King Trode, Sir Leopold, and Imperia. All 3 of them are from Dragon Quest VIII, that being the most recent main series Dragon Quest game at the time, although Dragon Quest IX would come soon after. These 3 monsters being in here is some sort of marketing strategy, and considering the sheer amount of Dragon Quest VIII monsters in this game, it's probably going to be a successful one. Now, these 3 monsters just being monsters from a main series game, and somewhat decent ones at that, that's cool and all, except there's actually 2 other monsters that are also unable to be accessed. These aren't monsters you directly get from Wi-Fi battling or tag battling like you did these 3, but rather they require one of these 3 in order to get. But first, let's back up a little bit. While playing Dragon Quest Monsters Joker, you're going to be accompanied by a monster called the Incarnus. He kind of plays a major role in the story, and in part of that role is him transforming a bunch. That's right, he has a bunch of different forms, and by the time you get to the post-game, you have the ability to manipulate him and change him to any form you want that you find the best for whatever situation you want him in. However, there are two magical legendary forms of the Incarnus that you cannot access unless you breed him with one of these monsters you can't acquire. Those are the Ace of Spades and the Wild Card. Both of these require you to breed him with either Leopold for the Ace of Spades or Imperia for the Wild Card. Now that's plenty fine, and considering how it's just legendary forms for the main monster of the entire game, it's not really that big of a deal. So let's move on to the next game in the series, in which didn't feature one monster so heavily, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 2. So, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 2 featured many more monsters, and of course it has many more monsters locked behind Wi-Fi because of that. When I say that, I mean that there is about 8 monsters you couldn't access unless you were really good at the game. Now, 3 of those monsters required you to win 5 battles on certain days of the week. By doing that, you'd win these monsters as a prize, and this was the only way to get these monsters. They're all low-ranking monsters with practically no redeeming qualities. That would be the Droll Diabolus, the Maniacal Mole, and the Seedy Weedle. The Droll Diabolus is a recolor that's been around since the first Dragon Quest game. The Maniacal Mole's got a nice hat and some shades, and the Seedy Weedle's really hard to find information about. That's about it for all of them. Now, of course, if you are within the top 100 scouts of your rank, and there are, of course, 5 ranks, those being Rookie Scout, Super Scout, Mega Scout, and Ultra Scout, you could actually win another monster. Now, these monsters are much better, and generally S or higher, when it comes to ranks, and are monsters you actually want to try and get. These are, if you're a rookie, the Schleiman Tank, which is, of course, a major player in Dragon Quest Monsters Rocket Slime. There's the Scout Ranks Fluffy, which is the legacy monster from the original Dragon Quest Monsters game, so it's a shame he's locked behind this, but hey, at least he's there. You've got the Super Scouts, Barbarous. This is, of course, from Dragon Quest IX, so they're just doing a similar thing like they did with Trode and Sir Leopold and Imperia back in the original Joker. Mega Scouts have the Stormgate Citadel. This is just funny because it's a castle from Dragon Quest VI that is technically a boss fight, but at the same time, imagine having a castle in your party. That'd be hilarious. And then finally, if you're an Ultra Scout, you're going to have access to Newman. So anyone who's played Dragon Quest VII, or I guess read any descriptions for him, knows that this is probably a worthy prize of being the best of the best. So with your Newman in tow, you'll be able to do whatever you want. However, besides these top 5 monsters that require you to actually be good at the game, there is still 3 monsters that we can still access through some other methods. You know what a tag battle is? Don't worry, neither do I, but hey, you gotta do some of that in order to unlock 2 of these monsters, those being the Ultra Slime and the Nemesis Slime. We're gonna talk a little bit more about these guys later, but for now, just know that they are here. Because of tag battling, you gotta win some tag battles to access them. That leaves to one last monster that kinda got treated like mythical Pokemon back in the good old days. That being, you had to go somewhere certain and download it directly onto your game. Although I'm not exactly sure about the details because I haven't really been able to find too much about this. But this monster that you could just download and have access to and probably had some unique special skills and whatnot is also Fluffy. So it's good to know that there was an alternate method to get him for those who are bad at the game but still wanted their favorite legacy monster. That leads us to all the monsters in Dragon Quest Monster Joker 2 being covered, so let's talk about the final game that was released internationally, Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. Now, fortunately for us, there are no monsters inherently locked behind Wi-Fi that you can't access otherwise in the game, so congrats to Square Enix for getting that right. However, there is still 3 monsters we can't access, and the reason why we can't access them is because they're locked behind a Japanese McDonald's collaboration. That's right, we're talking about the Triple Splatty, the Flurry Fiend, and the Mimic with Cheese. Now, despite the obvious fact that these monsters are all modeled after McDonald's menu items, there's nothing inherently special about these monsters. Their ranks aren't incredibly high, and they don't seem to be powerful like most of these monsters early on, especially in the Joker series, seem to be. However, you're still going to be missing out because the Mimic with Cheese looks really cool. But that seems to be about it, so I guess that's all we have to worry about, and that would be the end of the video. Except it isn't. See, I lied to you. I said we were only going to be covering games released internationally, but I was able to find data for one game that was only released in Japan. Although you can play it with fan translations and emulators and all that fun illegal stuff. So, we're going to be taking a look at the last game on our list, the game with probably the most Dragon Quest monsters you can't access. That's going to be Dragon Quest Monsters Terry's Wonderland 3D for the 3DS. Now, there are over 40 monsters in this game, so I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them. So, with that small disclaimer out of the way, let's get started and talk about the monsters you're not going to be able to see, regardless of whether or not you're playing this game legally. Now, of course, because this is a 3DS game, there are 6 monsters locked behind Street Pass battles. I don't know how those work, don't ask, but these are the 6 monsters you can't obtain. Slider Kids, Robin Hood, Slider Girl, Robin's Old Lady, Prince O' Thieves, and Robin Ladies. These are all based around either Slider Girl, who supposedly appears in Joker 2 Professional, and Robin Hood, who is a reoccurring monster throughout the series. Besides that, there's nothing too special about any of these people. When it comes to the majority of these monsters, about 30 of them are only obtainable by doing 1v1 online matches. Now, I don't know how this works. It could be similar to Joker 2, where you have to win a certain amount of times on a certain day, or maybe after a certain amount of wins, you just get a random monster as a gift. Considering how bad some of these monsters are, I don't know. I really don't know. But let's take a look at all of them. So, you have the Peeper, you have every single type of Ninja Slime, you have Sculptice, Ultra Slime, Nemesis Slime, Slime Gang, Stormgate, Citadel, Slime and Tink, Cat Ribeiro, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Eglon Chikara, Kakarot, Kasharami, Barbaro, Dometi, Slime Ship, Silver Ship, AU-1000, Newman, Schwarzman, Tank, Realm of the Mighty, Dimension Dragon, and Ramia. Let's back up and mention some pretty interesting ones here. Every single type of Ninja Slime, these guys look really cool, and if you didn't notice, every single one of their designs is actually based off another slime that has appeared in the Dragon Quest Monsters series. So if you can, without looking it up, tell me in the comments what every single one of these slimes is based around, which slime their costume takes inspiration from. I'll give you a shout out in the next video that I record since I've released this one, so it'll be in a couple weeks after this video gets released. The Ultra Slime and the Nemesis Slime both appeared in Joker 2, and I said I'd talk about them later. That's because they both also look like Ninja Slimes. So these guys are pretty cool. They also look like Power Rangers, so I guess, like, hey, why not? They look cool. The Slime Gang is just a bunch of slimes. Stormgate, Citadel, we've talked about, and so deal with the Slime and Tank. Cat Ribeiro, funnily enough, I was unable to find any images for this. It wasn't even on the site, so that's funny. Eglon and Chikara were super bosses in Dragon Quest IV, so good for them. Kakarot, Kasharami, Barbaro, and Dometi are all tied to the skill Summon, which appears in a handful of Dragon Quest games. I'm not going to go into more detail about that. Slime Ship and Silver Ship both seem to be rather original. Schwarzman Tank also appears in Rocket Slime, so good for it. Realm of the Mighty is, funnily enough, the final dungeon of Dragon Quest IX. I have no idea why it's here, but it's funny to think about. And then finally, Dimension Dragon and Ramia both also appear as monsters obtainable through the Nintendo Power crossover back in the original Dragon Quest Monsters 2. So that's fun. So there was a bunch of monsters, except there's still more monsters. That's right. If you participated in online tournaments, there was 2 monsters you could win as rewards. Once again, I don't know the details about this. I just know that online tournament wins will give you these monsters. These monsters are the Extreme Killing Machine and the Demonic Carriage. Once again, I don't know anything about these monsters, but hey, they look cool and they seem to sound cool, so I guess they're high rank, so I guess they're worthy prizes. Now, that may seem like a lot, but there's actually more. Let's back up a little bit. You remember Joker, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 1, and how Ace of Spades and Wildcard were locked behind the fact you needed Leopold and Imperia in order to breed them, or fuse them? Well, we're doing that again. That's right, there are now 9 monsters you can't access without you breeding monsters that I just mentioned that are technically inaccessible. So let's take a look at some of those, and then finally, we can be done with this video. The first one is the Gold Ninja Slime. This one requires multiple different Ninja Slimes. You can kind of mix and match them, but at the same time, Ninja Slimes are cool, and the Gold Ninja Slime makes sense since the Gold Slime is technically considered to be the pinnacle of slimes in most cases. The Grim Keeper requires the Sculpt Dice, so good for it. The Dark Mecha Slime requires 3 monsters, acquired 3 separate ways. That is the Ultra Slime and the Nemesis Slime, which I guess are technically obtained the same way, and the Slider Girl, which if you remember, you had to get by doing some Street Pass battles. The only monster you don't need that is not locked behind Wi-Fi is an Overkilling Machine. You can get that normally. The Slime Blaster is a giant cannon, and you need one of the 2 tanks. The Liquid Metal King Slime requires either Slime Blaster, either of the 2 tanks, or a Dark Mecha Slime, so depending on how good you are, that can determine basically whether or not you actually get anything. The, Hooting Hamgore, Excalibur, and Hannibal, also all Dragon Quest IX monsters, and they all require either Kakarot, Kasharami, or Barubaru respectively. That leads to the last monster. This is the Uber Killing Machine, which is the upgrade of the Extreme Killing Machine. Because, just some machines just don't kill enough. And that's the end of the video. So, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to like the video. If you're interested in exclusively Dragon Quest Monsters content, feel free to subscribe to my channel, because that's what I cover. Comments, please leave a comment if you want to talk about literally anything. I've had some pretty interesting discussions in the comment sections before, and considering how few views I get, I'm not going to be stopping anytime soon. Also, another thing you can do in the comments is recommend video ideas. In fact, this video had an idea that was recommended by a Gort Mortzel. They came up with a suggestion for this idea, so thank you very much. I enjoyed making this video, and I hope you enjoy watching it. That's about all I have to say. Leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, because I'm always looking to figure out ways I can improve. That's another place where the comment section is useful. Constructive criticism is very nice. So, thank you for all these things, and thank you for watching, and this has been Defeater of Souls.